get in there, and I don't know the science of it, but yeah, that pot will be pica.
Shawn, do you have a dedicated pot that you and the family use for either coconut candy or Dinensi? Or
well, just so in all fairness, I haven't cooked anything for Chris's holiday cooking show. So no.
I thought you meant next Christmas.
So you can't ask me. I'm nowhere near that right now. Bro.
Yeah. 709. He's from the That's It, That's All podcast on the KUAM Podcast Network. Our good buddy, Shawn Gumataotao, who, I mean, Shawn, it's been quite a year for you. I know you just came back from kind of lending a hand over there in the CNMI as they're dealing with, man, it's a crazy surge over there.
You know what? It has been a pretty wild year. And can I just start by saying, because we haven't don't do it that often, but can we say thank you to Joe Sir? Because every time Joe sets up his show, he's the guy that does the camera work. He's punching the buttons. Yeah. But he's always in the back. If it's not him, my party Mike's out there. But quite frankly, Joe's doing a good job. Joe, it was a good 2021 for you. So kudos to you and the link for putting it all together.
He's the hardest working man in show business. Well, I say it all the time.
Let's just put it this way.
Man. And then he's around there doing the news, all that kind of stuff. But yeah,
not everyone.
But going back to the CNMI if you want. But yeah, Chris, it's I think I looked at the numbers earlier. It went down a little bit early in the week. And just it's still charging. But you know, the interesting thing though is the vaccination rate is now, I think, somewhere in the 92%. Why it's important to remember to know this, because 94.2% is their number as of last night. So just to put in perspective, they were probably averaging just short of 1% a week, and just like Guam has. But to hit the 94 mark it just seemed like it just jumped in less than 2 or 3 days. Mm-hmm. So this is an important distinction that in the CNMI, that this is becoming so important for them. I mean, I was on that call with the WHO earlier in the week as well. It's down to brass tacks in the CNMI, and they're just trying to keep their community safe.
It's definitely interesting, Shawn, that you know, around the world we're reading about the Omicron variant. As the U.S., they said, was it like the single day?
Yesterday record? Was the single highest at 443,000 plus cases in a day.
Yeah, and so we're seeing Omicron. We're seeing over here in the NMI what's going on with, you know, presumably the Delta-driven surge. But what about us here, Shawn? We usually follow the trends that are happening in the States. And so do you get this feeling heading into 2022 that we're kind of collectively waiting for that other COVID shoe to drop?
Yes, based on, early, I guess, looks at the fatalities and what the fatalities were from which of the variants. That seems to be a very reasonable thought that we're not out of the woods yet.
That being said, though, still trying to look forward to 2022. What are some of the things you're looking forward to? I guess just, professionally, personally, politically for the island, and some of the challenges you think we're facing.
Yeah, let me start personally. Just my kids getting back to school, doing their things. The 2022 will probably be the start of a senior year for one of my kids. I might be getting a graduating college student at some point. So from that point of view, I think that despite the pandemic, there's some good things that are going to happen in 2022. Professionally, the podcast hitting to its second year, and I've been having a lot of fun with that. With obviously thanks to KWAM and the KWAM Podcast Network, being able to showcase just me talking story and sharing my insights. So I'm really appreciative of that. And then there's also some other things business-wise. I mean, it's just been busy. And then finally, I think when we look at on the outlook for the entire coming year, yes, the coronavirus doesn't seem like it's going to be going anywhere anytime soon. But then it's what's going to happen politically that'll kind of change the face of things. We know that it's going to be an uphill battle for whoever wants to run against the incumbent governor. From experience, that's going to be a tough one, considering the amount of, things that they're doing between now and the primary. If there is a challenger to the governor in her own party, it's still going to be a pretty uphill battle. But then when you look at the legislature and some of the things that they've been doing, is the community, are they happy with the policy making that's been happening over there? Are we going to see a change? It's getting closer and closer to that switch, perhaps. But don't forget, there's other offices that are also going to be running. So it seems like the political year in 2022, it could be either sea change or could be much more of the same.
Right. Shawn, let's go ahead and play your clip from the latest episode of That's It, That's All, podcast on the KUAM podcast network. Anything in advance about this clip, Shawn, before we play it, or you want me to just gun it?
Just kind of what we've been talking about for the last minute and a half. But yeah, just take a listen.
Put me in the front row on many an issue and talking to folks that I could never possibly imagine. A global pandemic didn't muzzle folks. It was the complete opposite. That meant learning in many different ways and from across many different platforms. Taking all the information in and from my chats, from Jigo to Mauricio, from Honolulu to San Diego, from Susupi back to Talofofo, what is for certain is that the past year was not without a lack of interesting insight. I could spend multiple podcasts talking about the big story of the year, the COVID pandemic. I have my general thoughts on the pandemic response and recovery and response again, but that would have to wait for another time. Don't think 2022 will mean the end of the coronavirus. Education, the focus of this podcast, was another. I'm happier that my kids are back to face-to-face instruction. There's no argument that keeping our kids away from school during the ongoing public health emergency will have long-term impacts. A July 27, 2021 article by management consulting firm McKinsey & Company noted that their independent analysis on COVID and education shows that the impact of the pandemic on K-12 student learning was significant, leaving students on average 5 months behind in mathematics and 4 months behind in reading by the end of the school year. They add, quote, "The pandemic widened pre-existing opportunity and achievement gaps, hitting historically disadvantaged students hardest," close quote. If being in the Western Pacific wasn't already tough enough for my kids, but all the school children of the region, I worry now about how these pandemic shutdown of schools in the U.S. states and territories will impact this generation's prospects and opportunities when they reach.
Yep. So I guess the gist of that, Shawn, is COVID ain't going anywhere. Let's grow around it.
Yeah, I think that it's probably safe to say, historically speaking, we can look at it. I was listening recently to a doctor who was talking about that, we kind of think to only looking at maybe the 1920 pandemic, but just over the last, five years plus, there's been, believe it or not, 5 pandemics, which blew my mind thinking about, we forgot about Ebola. We forgot about the other diseases that are hitting the rest of the world, but because it's at our doorstep, now we're taking full attention. So as a community, again, we should just continue to be vigilant. If you haven't got boosted, can I just say, I was there with my son when he got boosted last week. When Tricia and I went to get our booster shot, there was basically nobody in line. Yeah. When I went with my son, man, that line went out the door. So you can see, and we can tell that at least the people of Guam are now finally saying, all right, time to go do it. There's a lot of, trepidation. Holidays are coming up, especially New Year's. We're going to watch this. I know, Jason, you were mentioning earlier about the CAR score. We don't look at it as much anymore, but it is an indicator of where the community is headed relative to the pandemic. So if you can get boosted, get tested. If you're feeling it, if you feel cruddy, stay home. I think we're doing more and more of that today. Nobody wants to get their loved ones sick. So I'm just here to say, just do that, everyone, and try to keep safe and keep your groups down to a minimum during New Year's. And I know people are going to be doing that, and let's just be safe all around.
Shawn, let's talk politics. Right? You mentioned that sure. This is an election year coming up. Well, 2 days from now is an election year. And I was talking with someone who works in politics the other day, and the big elephant in the room, no pun intended, is where are the Republicans and who's going to run under the Republican banner? I mean, usually by this point you would have heard anything, right? I mean, the posturing, the name dropping, the buzz, but outside of Frank Blas Jr. Being mentioned as, I don't know if he's a number one or a number two. I haven't really heard anything, and I'm wondering. I mean, are they just going to throw a warm body out there? And because I know the thinking is, like you said, it's going to be hard to deal with an incumbent administration that has billions of dollars in federal aid in their war chest.
Yeah, tactically, you want to find someone that can contrast with the sitting governor. And again, when you have that much in resources, you can spend over just about $1 billion into the community in a short period of time. And reminding everyone about that, it makes it very hard. I don't think that the party is, I'm sure, prepared. I've been to meetings. I know the ground game is getting ready. I know that they're looking at a successful run. But then also, it's the legislature as well. I mean, when you look at what's happened over the last 2 years or a year and change, because we're going into their second year, is the community, have they been pleased with the response? It's been an executive branch response for over almost 2 years. And then when we look to lawmakers for, assistance, if you will, has it been the kind of assistance that this community has needed? A lot of oversight hearings. I don't think at any time in the history of Guam's legislature and that basic duty to do oversights, I've never seen this many oversights in this last year plus. And it's the attempt to try to run the executive branch via the legislative branch, saying, well, I appropriate, I can kind of lean on them. But then what's the requisite policy response? Is there going to be a law that's going to be changed? We have a budget act that proves that wasn't the case. I don't know how many oversight hearings and then a budget act that did not have a requisite change in policy. So what does that mean for Republicans that are running? Well, you can throw that one as one, but two, it's going to force Democrats to kind of tighten up. Will they be able to just okay, we're done with all that stuff. Can we move and tighten up what needs to be done in the community? And they have the majority. And so it remains to be seen if they're going to be able to do that into 2022 in a short period of time. Another budget act is coming. And is it going to represent the priorities of this community? And we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, and you know what I think is going to be the challenge for the Democrats, and and maybe just not hearing anything about a Republican gubernatorial candidate. I mean, just outside looking in, Shawn, to me, maybe it would look like the focus is on capturing the majority in the legislature, which I feel like the Republicans could do. I mean, theoretically, they could do it, especially because we have this gubernatorial election next year. And so what I think is going to happen is you're going to have a lot of the Democrat senators having to kind of campaign under, Lou's wing, right, as the mama hen. And people, I think, are tired of these senators and the governor, certain senators and the governor just kind of being in cahoots. We don't see a lot of the legislature, for the most part, trying to hold the governor accountable. I mean, it's just really a couple Democrats trying to do that. So I think that's actually going to be a negative when you see, these Amanda Sheltons and these Jocelyn Augustines holding hands with Lou down the campaign trail. I think it's going to backfire, and I think the voters want to see, what's that old political saying? They want to see daylight between Democrats and Democrats, I think, because it's right. Clear, right? There hasn't been, there has been an attempt definitely to hold the administration transparent and accountable, but they just really kind of dug in their heels on so many issues that I'm not sure the legislature has been able to succeed at doing that.
And also with daylight is, what is the voter turnout going to look like? Are we again going to look at the lowest voter turnout? And we're now starting to look like our U.S. mainland counterparts. I think programs like this one to talk about the issues and whether or not the current senators or the current governor will be able to properly and eloquently express their viewpoints on these policy calls. Hopefully, we'll start seeing a little bit more of that and more of the people listening and then making those conscious choices when they're in the ballot box. I mean, it's going to be very simple. It's like, are you satisfied with what you've seen from them? And will you give them another chance at this job over, well, in the course of the governor 4 years and the legislature for 2 more? At such a pivotal point. And it's not a cliche. Let's just be frank. It is not a cliche to say a pivotal point in the history of the island. We are coming off probably the worst pandemic, well, definitely of our lifetime, and probably the largest, event of any Monomco's lifetime outside of the World War II. So, I mean, this is a big deal, and how the people respond, how the community responds, we'll have to wait and see. But it's great fodder for this show looking into 2022. It'll keep us guessing, but hopefully as we look at it, talk to people, the election 2022 is going to be a big one, and it should be a lot of fun talking about it and surmising what could happen somewhere around November.
Shawn, you've been in the trenches, like helping with political campaigns, but then you've also been an analyst, right? And given what you just said about, the significance and all of, kind of like the buildup and, voter frustration, voter anticipation, voters, wanting change. I mean, they always do every single election cycle, but more so this year, as you said, right? Do you think any incumbents basically have almost like guaranteed job security at this point? Because it was funny because like the last election, you said like a lot of, the old guard came back, Frank Blas Jr. came back, Joanne Brown came back, Tony Atta came back and everything like that. Even given that the case, are there going to be like a lot of voters who basically say, because we did not like thrive through the pandemic, they, for rather fairly or unfairly, they're going to say, hold them responsible for that, and they just want them out?
Yeah, I remember I said like the more the adults are now in the room as soon as that group came in, because then we had all these folks who had experience were brought to bear. Now we're starting to hear from them, but again, is this group have they been able to reach the community? Have they been able to articulate the values? And it's not going to be in oversight hearings, and it's not going to be any other way. The retail politics of old is gone. And so now how do we, in the modern times, how do we get to the electorate? How are they going to say, hey, this is what I've done for this community? But how has it responded to what has been happening today? A pandemic, an economic slowdown, lack of tourism. These issues are going to bubble up. It isn't going to be whether or not we're changing village names. It's not going to be about whether or not we have a new park benches. We're talking about larger implications for policy and operations of the government of Guam. That's going to be it should be the driving message. And if they're not doing that, not telling you, you might want to ask them why they're running for office at that point.
Now that being the case, right? So conversely now, obviously the incumbents are going to say their marketing pitch to the electorate is going to say, okay, you want consistent experienced leadership, stay the course and everything like that. We've been guiding it to this point. Let's, let us continue to do the work that we've already begun. You don't want, newbies coming in and, having to start over from scratch. If you are, a first-time candidate or someone coming back and everything like that, how do you kind of, make that penetration in the mind of the voters to say, consider me because there's something I could bring to the table that could help the island?
Yeah, so this is my free pitch, my free advice to those guys who want to be. When they ask you a question, don't say, I have to research it. You should have a ready answer for the matters and the issues of the day. If you do not know an answer on health, safety, and education, you don't have one. That is why folks are not electing these people. Electability goes down because they can't answer the simple question of the issues and the values of our community. And that's Shawn's advice to those guys wanting to run. If you're listening and you know who you are, if you can't answer a question, by the way, you can't answer the question on this program, you're in deep kimchi. You are not going to be doing very well.
Especially if the question is something as simple as like, tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, you can't get past that.
Sorry, I have to check my my website's not up right now. I don't know. Yeah, exactly.
Shawn,
it's easier for me. My thing was always like, can you join a Zoom call without major technical issue?
Or can you drive a stick shift, as Jason was saying earlier? Can you do that? I mean, what are you going to ask them?
Shawn, how do Lou and Josh, how do they campaign on winning this pandemic? Because, I mean, you can't really gloss over the inaction of the Delta surge, the lives we lost, right? And so It's interesting to me that we're now in this mode, given that Omicron is everywhere all around us, that we're in this mode where we're now calling the COVID-19 pandemic commemorative, and we're giving out, these pins to kind of like celebrate. I mean, that to me, that's something that you do at the end of a thing, if you will. So how do Lou and Josh campaign on COVID and say, hey, we kept you safe, you're welcome?
Well, if they're listening this morning, the commemorative pin, I'm still a little, I'm not sure
Did
what
you get
the
yours, or?
rationale was, but and then you sign an extension of the executive order to the end of January.
Yeah.
Maybe if she didn't sign the extension and a coin, things would be a little different, or a core 4, that would be different.
Right. Yeah.
But today we are looking at still, we have high vaccination rates. We have all the therapeutics at our fingertips. And I think the president just a couple days ago said to the governors, "It's on you now. What is the response?" And then we'll all watch for the next 11 months, and then going into our final term, or final year of her term, is her response. So very eager. I'm rooting for them to have that response, and that's what so that the community can be more, be realistic in what's going through, and are we reassured exactly about what the direction is for this community in 2022.
Right. Well, Jay, you good?
Is there a snowball's chance in hell, Shawn, that your former boss maybe,
yeah, so he's talking about former Governor Felix Camacho. And other than Frank Blas Jr., I did hear for like a second that, maybe former Governor Camacho is thinking about running. I don't know. Have you heard anything? Wink if it's true. Wink if it's true.
Change your virtual background if it's true.
And if I get a WhatsApp later saying it's otherwise, but last I checked, I think he's enjoying his grandchildren. He's enjoying life after. He has been, doing different things. And so I think he's enjoying that more so. And I think he's talking with guys like Governor Joe Atta to understand that. I think former Governor Eddie Calvo is a little bit more active in that. I think he's going to have a big say and a big help to the Republicans and how they'll strategize 2022.
Yeah.
Is that good or bad? Well, it's what it is. It's we have these three titans of Guam politics are still around doing what they would be doing, getting to the grassroots, getting to their supporters, and in some cases, Chris and Jay, some of the supporters have passed. So it's like it's their families. Yeah. Is what we used to do back in the day in 2006 in the election there. Is it still relevant today? So it's about the retail politics, how all of that works out, and the leadership of the party coming together and getting people fired up to do, one, to run for governor, and two, to finally get a majority in the Guam legislature. It's been a really long time, over almost nearly 20 years now.
Shawn, so what do you make of just the kind of like the state of the Republican Party? Because I mean, I've talked to former Governor Eddie Calvo, and he says he's not running. No. Former Governor Camacho, you say not likely. Former Governor Joe Atta, I'm pretty sure he's too old for this. But outside of, like you said, those three titans, there is no one else.
Well, there's a couple of folks that I think that they're in the legislature. So you're right, Frank Blas, and you got Tony Atta still around. At least jump out, because if Mike Sinicles leaves the Congress, will Senator Moylan want to go and run for the congressional seat? But then what that'll do is also Democrats will jump out of the legislature. My understanding, you have Talina Nelson and the former speaker, Wampat wants to run. You might see the scuttle is that you might see Regine Lee also run. I know she's probably enjoying life with her kids and her husband. So
but
it's
I noticed
good, and she's doing other things.
Right.
But if that dynamic will change things. But from the leadership of the party, at least in what I've seen, that's the big one. Who will be the standard bearer for this 2022 campaign? Who can, in fact, draw the contrast between that person and the sitting incumbent governor.
What about like a
uphill battle.
What about a shakeup? Say like, and there is nothing I'm basing this on. This I have no information that would prove this to be true. But like, say maybe like a dark horse, right? Like somebody from the Republican Party with a very strong name, with a track record of effective leadership, like Elizabeth Barrett Anderson. Just say I'm being completely arbitrary here. Like, what if she came out? Obviously, she's got a lot of cachet.
Never going to happen.
Yeah, but I think a lot of those folks would have to have the machine behind them. Right now, that probably will be unlikely. But yes, I mean, right now, as the party's trying to do its thing, and Juan Carlos is probably listening too. Hopefully he's listening and he can shed some light over the next couple of weeks. But that's probably the best question of the day.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that a lot of people are just kind of waiting to see what Congressman Mike Nicholas is going to do. Like, I've never heard a Republican say, like, I don't know, if this Democrat doesn't run, then I might run for his position. But if he's in office, I'm not going to bother him because we're buddy-buddy.
So it's the ultimate game of chicken, basically.
Yeah.
Who flinches first?
And then on the Democrat side, I'm hearing Tim Uggan, the Veterans Affairs director, is planning on, I've heard he's already got a logo. And so are we going to see one of these elections like Shawn, where we have the incumbent administration like trotting out all their directors and B-listers to run for senator and an attempt to fill seats of the legislature?
I mean, but they'll probably do that if they believe that they're going to lose some to run for Congress or run for governor. I mean, that's probably the only reason why the administration would say, all right, you, let's push you out. So that, for one, they can protect the majority. Secondly, it's so that they have their guys in, they can complete their, their platform for the next 4 years. So yeah, that sounds very reasonable. I think that it would be crazy to think that some of these guys like a Tim won't make that jump.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm excited. If that's the case, there's some pretty talented folks that are working in the cabinet today that can take the jobs of the current 15 lawmakers at any day of the week. And you're probably going like, what, really? But yeah, there's a couple of them that can. And they should run scared is the word. Run scared, because at this point, if any one of them can take their seat, it's going to happen. You know, they got to be you got to be careful.
I want to go back to
that they're going to win again.
I mean, you guys, Shawn was the communications director for the Camacho administration, and he did a bunch of stuff. But I want to go back to this pins thing, Shawn. We did have a comment. You were right, Chris. The pins were given out at this time while we prepare for a storm. It makes no sense. And then Mark comments, pins, have respect to those who lost their loved ones during this horrible pandemic. I tatlu. And Shawn, with the pins thing, right? I mean, I totally get it, right? We want to recognize these frontliners, but how do you do that in such a haphazard, like half-ass way? I mean, you know, they first of all, they don't tell anybody about this program. Then what ends up happening is you see certain people start posting on social media that they got a COVID pin. And then the media was kind of like, hey, what's going on with this? And then when they asked Adelup about it, they said, oh, we're still figuring out the system. And then it was like, oh, GMH didn't get them, GPA didn't get them, GDOE didn't get them, the mayor's council didn't get them, the mayor's staff didn't get them.
Like, Shawn, you didn't get one as a UOG professor, right?
Or a public health consultant?
No, I did not. Yeah. And I was face-to-face as well. And But also, I think the optics, too, and there was an image of the governor giving the pin to somebody. So I thought we were not, as a community, not getting too close to people, not giving stuff. I don't know.
But then the rationale, Shawn, but when you asked, like, why are you giving these pins? It was just like they just threw everything at the wall. I mean, Crystal Paco San Augustine was saying, like, oh, we haven't been able to recognize the employees. We haven't had the MAG Pro in how many years? So we're just throwing them a bone. And then it became like, oh, we got to thank the frontliners. And then it was like, oh, no, everyone didn't get them, but we have a system. Relax. And then the governor chimed in and said, oh, yeah, the private sector. The private sector is going to get them. And so, I don't know, why are we using local funds for this thing as well?
Yeah, that's a great question that maybe Crystal can come on this air and discuss with your listeners. That would be first and foremost. Secondly, I think that when we think of pins and the private sector, I don't think we're looking for pins. I think we're looking for solutions to the economy getting back on. They're looking for tourists to come back to Guam. They're looking at ways that we can get our workforce trained for this new era of life post-pandemic. We're also looking at ways that our roads can be maybe improved. the quality of life can be improved for all of our community. Those things probably would be up our wheelhouse as the private sector is doing its thing. And I think PINs probably fall to the bottom of that list in terms of priority.
How do you screw it up, though? How do you screw up something like we're trying to recognize the frontliners and it turns into this huge political mess? I think it just goes back again to...
Hold on, Chris. Let me look over my shoulder. That's not me. That's a question for other people.
How do you screw it up? It should be a win-win. I mean, and it's the execution of it. When certain people are getting it and it's a special group of government employees and other people aren't getting it, if your slogan is in or all in, it's already kind of like people have this mentality that, you got to get in to, get the stuff, or you got to be in to get a pin or whatever it is. Why wouldn't you wait until you had all the pins and give them to everybody at the same time and just avoid this whole, now it's tainted?
Or just ditch the pins and say thank you for your service.
Yeah, or ditch the pins.
It would have been easier for, and again, taking it out of something we did even in our administration. We went to every single agency and thanked every single employee. I know in the pandemic you can't do that. Yeah. You can do as best you can. Yeah. But you go around and you talk to people and say thank you for your service, thank you for your continued work. And that goes a long way than whether or not a pin will be given. I think that we're losing sight of public service and what those folks are doing today. And but yeah, that's a great question for Crystal. I hope she comes on this air. I hope she talks to you, Chris and Jason. It's been a while. We haven't heard from her because she's been busy, and hopefully she'll spend some time with you all.
Shawn, thank you so much for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, guys. And again, don't forget to listen to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Amazon Music. Don't forget, it's on the iHeartRadio app and on Pandora. And again, I am truly appreciative to the KYM Podcast Network and being a part of it. And I know that 2022 for the Podcast Network is going to be a lot of good stuff. You already kind of teased a little. Yeah. So now you're making me think I got to up my stuff because you got some big guns coming. So it should be a lot of fun.
Shawn, someone messaged me, are you running for office?
No.
That's it. No.
Let me say, no, I'm not running.
Hell no, unequivocally. No. Munga. Thanks, Shawn.
Could I get
okay, James?
Shawn, real quick on your opinion. Before I started, my job in the media, we're roughly the same age. But I remember watching you before you moved to news, when you were doing sports and everything. And I don't know many Bay Area sports fans as passionate, as ardent as you are, and everything like that. So talk a little bit about the late John Madden and what his impact had on you getting into the business, and just follow. I know you're a big Raiders fan, even when they went down to LA, the Todd Christensen years and everything like that. But what did his style of telling people what the game was like and the significance of it? How did that shape you and your broadcaster, and as you even went into news?
Yeah, well, I was a big fan of John Madden, so it was very sad news to hear that he passed. I believe he was living in Pleasanton at the time, which is right down the street from my parents' house in the Bay Area. Oh, wow. So it was a big shock that, he was getting older, but also, he had gone off there and retired. But you're right about in terms of his color commentating was some of the best in the business. He's in the Hall of Fame for a reason. It's a huge loss to the NFL, a huge loss to football fans, and for me, I just absolutely adored him. And, I can't say boom many times today, but I'll do my best to do so. But yeah, big loss for the NFL.
Right. Yeah. As just a football, going back to 80s, 90s, of course, the epitome of a football announcer, but then for him to really evolve into the video games. Right?
Yep.
That's crazy.
I know. Everybody knows that. Oh, he was that really good sportscaster.
Yeah,
by the way, he won a Super Bowl as a coach, you guys. Right. And and he's got this line of games named after him and everything like that. But Shawn, talk a little bit, because you said, his proximity to your parents, in Northern California and everything. What did he mean to the Oakland community, and what he was able to do for the attitude, the personality of the old school Raiders, the ones that they said they were the cast-offs, the ruffians and everything like that. But you put them all in one room, and it was all about just win, baby.
Yeah, the reason why he was so successful and why the Raiders franchise was so successful was Al Davis. Al Davis believed in him. He brought the silver and black to a place that people started to fear, started to understand that this was a complete franchise that's committed to winning. And even despite when he left, that whole aura of the Raiders kept with them, is still with them now as they're in Las Vegas. And so it's that it started, believe it or not, that, yeah, Tom Flores might have had contributed a lot to it. People will argue John Gruden and you name it, but really it was John Madden. And I mean, you go back to George Blanda, you can go down the list of the certain Raiders who created that franchise, but he will be the one missed so much because he's the one who created the current aura of the silver and black and the way that they're viewed and the kind of their game that they are today.
And they said he had relationships with each and every one of his former players, like until the day when they left the earth, or now, John Madden sadly is not with us. And I mean, he was
big
like
loss,
a father
big
figure.
Loss for football.
Yeah,
big loss for football, that's for sure.
Thank you, Shawn. Oh, we had a comment here.
Thanks,
what about the thousands who followed the mandates of taking the vaccines, adhering to safety protocols? Do they get a pin? Or what about we give a pin to everybody who didn't catch COVID?
Like I said, Crystal can come on this air and talk about expansion of pins.
We'll see, Shawn.
And now are you going to have different color pins?
Yeah.
If you have like the gold pin or the platinum pin, does that mean you get to park in like a
Why
nice
would we-
spot? Or
but
if you go to a particular restaurant,
also-
does that give you free Loco Moco? Or
Why would we give pins to people who teleworked during the pandemic? If you saw the letter from the governor, it said that they were honoring those who worked during the pandemic and even teleworked. Like, if you stayed home and worked in Zoom, do you really need a medal?
And you're going on that pin, aren't you?
I'm sorry.
There's about 300 teachers right now that are like,
don't apologize. Don't apologize. I understand.
Yeah.
But yeah, Crystal, if you're listening, call the station.
That's what I think. It's just
Let's
like
talk
you
about
should be, instead of reactionary or, just come out and face the music. That's how you do it as a comms. Well, take it from one of the best.
I did it for 8 years, so yes, I would agree.
Thank you, Shawn.
Good and bad. Thanks, guys.
Right on.
Happy New Year, brother.
7:46. It is Thursday, December 30th. We talked a lot about Madden. We got Sports Link with Dave Delgado coming up, and the Attorney General of Guam, Levin Camacho, is on the way right here on the link, which is brought to you by Pacific Points, Cabo Enterprises, IT&E, and Jack in the Box. Let's go to the phones just real quick. Ma'am, I know you've been calling a few times. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi. So, ma'am, your name again. I'm sorry.
This is Lynn.
Again?
Lynn,
yeah. So Lynn is Chamorro Land Trust lessee, and she had called about the emergency rental assistance program. Lynn, I was able to talk to Speaker Therese Terlahi yesterday right here on the link. I don't know if you heard the interview.